that is where the growth and stretch happens, like in them kind of, you know, the discomfort, in the kind of, you know, recognizing your kind of part in what happened.
But yeah, it's kind of how we try to collectively keep doing something so that it moves, you know, from that moment into a movement as well.
A moment on its own and then forgotten is a problem, but attached to a movement, I think they have equal importance.
Luckily, the karaoke was like a group karaoke, so even if Yude was like, rah, rah, like there was other people in the choir. Hello, welcome back to the 8th series. Why are you laughing?
No, I just loved your energy. I loved it.
Hello, welcome back to the 8th series season of Social Matters. We are so excited to be back. We are 3 people in our 40s talking about social matters. 4th floor, baby.
Yeah, baby. We're all here. We loved it. Yeah, so I turned 40 over the summer.
No way.
I know.
No
Oh my God, I thought
way.
you were like at least 50. At least
What?
25. Sorry.
50?
I'm joking.
Luggage. Yeah, no, I feel like I'm 19, but here we are.
Good.
And you look like you're 19.
Yeah,
Thank
exactly.
you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was epic celebrations. Celebrations wasn't just one. I've had a few. And yeah, it's a really nice feeling. It's a really nice. I've embraced turning 40 like a new friend that I want to cuddle and say, "Hey girl, how are you? I'm happy to meet you. How are we going to do life together?" Yeah.
Love that.
I
It's
loved
good.
it.
It's good. The 4th floor is good. I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this decade.
Yeah.
How about you, Uncle?
I'm only joking.
No, I was gonna say about whether you've felt any shift, because I think sometimes when people are approaching significant milestone age-wise, well, for me, I prep myself, so I already start telling before I turn 40. I already start telling myself I'm that age.
It's really interesting. I noticed like when I was 39 all that time ago, I kept saying, "Oh yeah, I'm 40.
Yeah,
like,
I do that.
I'm 40 next month, or I'm 40 in 6 months," and I was like, "Oh, I should have done more to be like I'm 39."
Yeah.
You know, and kind of sat in that. But you said,
Maybe put it at me
yeah,
before.
because you said when the clock strikes 12 on your 40th birthday, you're gonna struggle to get out of bed. You're gonna feel it in your knees. I was like, no, I will not talk myself into being old. So yeah.
But it is better to be on the 4th floor, and your party of the year. I know the year's not over, but already they're giving out awards.
It's got the accolade.
It's got the accolade.
Sure.
It deserves all the accolades. Party of the year, off the chain. We did some posts early on a couple of months ago. Last month, about your party. So if people missed out, they missed out. But check out our social medias for some of them.
Yeah, it was a time. I had a great time.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys had a great time as well.
So good.
Have you made any birthday resolutions or new objectives or?
Just to not speak myself into being I'm old. Like I think that there's been a real kind of recognition of how I talk myself into certain things. So I think, well, I've like joined the gym like about 3 months before my 40th, and I'd always had this narrative of I'm not very strong. Like I'm not really strong.
Yeah.
And then
She can pull buses.
Yeah. Week on week, I'm just pulling more, lifting more, and I'm like, oh my days, my whole life I've had this narrative of I'm not strong. Like how reductive and reducing that's been, and through pulling stuff and lifting stuff, I'm like, no,
you're incredibly strong.
I'm incredibly strong,
Yeah.
and so I think my sort of resolution or recognition is the importance of not having that's not a word. Reductive narratives about myself. So yeah,
I love that. That's so good.
Yeah.
How about you, Yuge? How was your summer?
Good. I was just trying to think about the party of the year was probably the thing I was most excited about for the summer, not just because Nads is here, but there was something like that was really, really special in everyone being there for you, but also, and I don't know if you've spoken about it before, but that kind of sense of belonging in certain environments, and just throwback 90s naughty theme. Like every tune is the ones that are not cancelled. Every tune was because we have to go back and think about our childhood stars. Those are not cancelled. Only those who are not cancelled were played.
Can I have a rewind and not put it back on?
Yeah, exactly. But all of the songs, the old school Nintendo, Connect 4, Dominoes, card games, karaoke. I had so many requests for me to sing so many songs, but I was like, you know what? Everyone calm down.
Calm down.
I'll send you a CD afterwards. But calm down. But
Luckily, the karaoke was like a group karaoke, so even if you was like, like there was other people in the choir to sort of
I'm always
backing singers.
But I'm always the loudest.
No,
but
your
no, my son,
enthusiasm can't beat it.
can't beat it. But no, my summer was good, and then also went for a short break away, which was good. It wasn't many days, but it's just good to change location, sunshine by the sea. So yeah, I had a good summer.
Yeah, I love that.
And what about you? You had an exciting summer, didn't you?
Well, I'm just back to the party. We can't move on from the party, but I was just laughing when you saying so many good tunes. Every time it was so like old school sweat pit in there, and every time I go out just to get some breather outside, another tune would come on. So I was saying there was so many unfinished conversations because I was like, I'm really sorry, I can't go back. It's just like this. But yeah, that was amazing. And I'd been at a family wedding that day, so it was like a whole that day was an amazing 24 hours. I went to the Euros Lionesses, which you know about, which was just amazing. So that was a couple of months ago, but yeah, just we didn't know what tickets, like who we were going to see, and then we had 2 quarters, 2 semis, and the final, and it was just a whole vibe. And yeah, still kind of high on that. And it was just, I guess, amazing because it felt like I was part of a movement.
Great segue.
Felt like I was part. This isn't contrived, but no, it feels very contrived. But no, it did feel like I was part of a movement in kind of women's football and women's sport, and to be part of that moment that is a part of a bigger movement was just so important. And I say that because, you know, them winning has just, I think, brought so much important kind of spotlight on the women's game, but also what this group of players has done is so incredible. But also we had, you know, Kerry Davis on this podcast a few months ago, who was the first black woman to play for England, and just to see her getting her well-deserved flowers, like she handed the kind of the cup to the Lionesses when they went on their parade on the Mall, and just really getting that exposure and representation is so important. So it's definitely been a really great kind of thing for women's football and women's sport in general as well. So definitely a good summer in that respect, which leads us nicely in that beautiful segue that I did to today's conversation.
Even to say to myself.
Even if I started to think of it and I was like, Nadia's going to love this. She's going to love this. I was like, but yeah, we wanted to, you know, we our work is around diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging. And I think one of the things that comes up a lot in our work with organisations, but I suppose also on a wider global societal level, is around the importance of this work being a movement rather than a moment, but also to discuss what some of the challenges and barriers are to the fact that we often do see it as a moment, and how we kind of think about it being a more sustained movement, particularly when, you know, there's so much happening globally. I think it can be hard to kind of, you know, hold things in mind and navigate that. So we just wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit more. And I suppose to open it up, what do you two see as, I suppose, the difference between a moment and a movement? So when having this conversation, what's your understanding, what we're talking about when we think about that?
It's interesting when you say those words, because when I hear movement and moment, I don't see like one being more important than the other. I think they both have equal importance, but at different stages. So the way that I see moments are significant. We need moments to happen. So you mentioned the Lionesses. We need that moment of the Lionesses winning to almost kind of like ignite something. And then what does one do with that? It's a little bit like jumping a car. So if a car is not starting and you use jumper cables, you jump it. And then once it gets that kind of jump, you need to rev the engine, you need to keep the car going, to keep the motor going so the car continues to go. So I think when I think about moments, I think they're so significant in the history, whether it's EDI work, whether it is fighting against racism or against discrimination. We're seeing current world events like the genocide of the Palestinian people, and the kind of moments that happen through the protesting and people standing up. But then for it to be a movement, it needs to be consistent. It needs to put pressure on different governments and people in political power to really create long-lasting change. So when I think about a moment, it's a significant moment that is the ignition for ongoing, long-term change, and that long-term change is the movement to kind of change culture, to change mentality, to change narrative, and that's how it's always been in history with regards to fighting discrimination and oppression.
Yeah, it was when you first started speaking, you said, I don't think one is more important than the other, and I was having a bit of a reaction. I was like, no, the movement is important, not like the moment isn't, like it's the movement. And then actually, like, hearing you kind of speak, it's like, yeah, moments are important as well, but for that kind of, like you was talking about, the push, the extra kind of, zhuzh or whatever. I can't get my words. But like, zhuzh, to kind of drive it forward. And then you said consistency, and I was thinking, when you were talking about movement moment, I was thinking about the journey of it, and then you said consistency, and then this image came to mind. This one. I don't know if you can see it there. Can you?
I'm going to try and zoom in at this.
Yeah, try and zoom in. But this idea of, what is consistency? People think consistency is this, like showing up 100 every single day at all times, in these moments. But actually, consistency can actually be, showing up as much as you can in that moment. Maybe not, just little bits, but the journeying is, kind of the movement, kind of working towards that movement and keeping going. And I think that, you kind of reference the genocide, like, there are times when it's like, oh, it feels like I'm not doing enough, like I'm not using my voice enough, I'm not, out there enough. And sometimes, that is the case, but maybe you can only do what you can in the moment that you're in, as long as you're doing something at all times. Like, the consistency is the important thing to kind of keep going. And yeah, maybe kind of resistance or protesting doesn't always have to be kind of out there or public. It can be in other ways. And sometimes it has to be out there and public. And it's just the importance of doing something continually, to kind of work towards the movement keep moving and not becoming stagnant or eventually irrelevant. Like, actually, how do we keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a similar sort of thinking when you were saying that, Yude, about like kind of not one being more important, but had the same journey with you, Nat, because actually you need the moment for the movement to come. So many ways sort of interrelated, and that image of that kind of what consistency looks like is so important, because I think there's so much stuff going on, like the consumption of news, that you're just like the end is nigh, and it can really feel hopeless. And we've had that conversation about hope, and I think it is that thing of like little bits, and sometimes focusing on the micro, when the macro can just feel really overwhelming, and thinking could be doing more, and should be doing more. And I often have the same thing about everything that's going on globally, and then thinking, okay, what can I do in my day-to-day interactions? And then sometimes I might do a bit more macro, but it's kind of how we try to collectively keep doing something so that it moves, from that moment into a movement as well.
When thinking about movement, a moment, just to add, I think a moment is only not important if people don't do something with it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the ignition is there, the kickstart is there, but if you don't do anything with it, if you don't change it into a movement, then that's when the moment becomes irrelevant. And I know we're leading up to, for example, Black History Month, which is significant for a lot of organisations in recognising the history of Black people in the UK, and other commemorative months that we have during the year. And the kind of challenge or the call to action for organisations is, okay, the month is a moment. So it's like, okay, the spotlight is shone, it's a moment, let's do something within our organisations to really think about celebrating Black history, to think about our own organisation in the context of Black history, and zooming in on anti-racism, for example, unconscious bias, allyship. But then what do you do on November 1st, on December 1st, on January 1st? And that is where the movement happens. So a moment on its own and then forgotten is a problem. But attached to a movement, I think they have equal importance.
Yeah, because it's often kind of history months or particular days that are used as examples of potential moments if they're not used to kind of, translate into action and doing something. And I'm not against them per se, because I think, kind of forefronting marginalised voices is important. But I think it's about the importance of, beyond that month, what are you doing? And back to that idea of consistency. And I think another example of when we're thinking about moments that have potentially been moments and not maybe translated into meaningful movements is the murder of George Floyd. I think that was a significant moment to kind of bring to the forefront institutional, structural racism, and massive conversations were happening at the time. A lot of organisations committed to anti-racist programs and being allies and taking action, but then it sort of fizzled out. And I suppose what ideas do you have for where that energy has gone? Because I do think for some it has translated to a movement. I don't think it's completely binary, but I think for some it maybe was more of a moment. And what do you think's happened to that sort of energy that was there, 5 or 6 years ago?
I think the energy is there in spaces and in pockets, but I do kind of agree in terms of how much we were talking about it and thinking about it has kind of sort of fizzled out. However, I think that there's something about when things happen or kind of things are given a lot of focus and attention, like the challenge. It's a challenge to kind of, I suppose, maintain the level of especially for some people who maybe weren't aware or had as much kind of connection with racism and institutional racism and that sort of thing, of like the constant sort of I need to know more and do more. It's a challenge to maintain that same level, I guess, because it is a relearning. It is a sort of understanding of privilege that you might have, and that puts you in an uncomfortable position, but it's still work that has to be done. I'm not kind of excusing that. I think that to maintain a certain level of energy is hard, and actually it is important to recognize, but that is where the growth and stretch happens, like in them kind of the discomfort, in the kind of recognizing your kind of part in what happens and what doesn't happen. So I do think that it's George Floyd's murder was almost like reckoning for a lot of people, and that is that's a big thing to kind of to grapple with, and it's something you absolutely need to be grappling with consistently, but you can't maintain a pace at a consistent pace at all times and in all things. There has to be a bit of a change of pace.
I agree with you. I was having a similar thought and reflection going back to what you were saying about consistency. It looks different, and I think the reason why the George Floyd moment was so significant because it was a really massive ignition. But what you're saying around pace, I think, is so spot on. And I was thinking about, obviously, any opportunity to bring Arsenal into every podcast, I'll do it. But there was a couple of seasons ago when Arsenal just kept winning games 5-0, 4-0, 6-0, like 4, 6, 7 games in a row, and it became the norm to Arsenal fans, and we started singing the chant of like stadiums are empty everywhere we go because fans were walking out because we were just beating teams very early on, and the reality is that we're not able to keep that, we're not able to maintain that. But what learnings do we have from that period that we took into other games, and we started winning 1-0 or winning 2-0, and that's the realistic pace. So to answer your question, I think there was always going to be a drop off from any significant moment, and I think there was always going to be a drop off from George Floyd. I think my challenge to a lot of organisations and individuals is just don't allow it to go off the table, recognize when you don't have the capacity to keep up that pace and when you need help and assistance. And that may come from external agencies like us. It may come from different people taking the lead on different things. But to dismiss it, like what a lot of the things that's going on in America, where they've just completely taken EDI off the table, that's a problem. But to recalibrate, readjust, and think about new ways to keep such conversations alive is important. There's one thing, another football reference, there's one thing Sir Alex Ferguson said when he was manager of Manchester United, is that he always evolved the team when they were in a position of strength. He never allowed them to get to a position where they were really, really rubbish as they are now, and try to try to make change from a really deficit position. So recognizing when the consistency is a bit reduced, and thinking about, okay, what do we need to support us to still be strong in not only anti-racism but in all forms of tackling discrimination.
Yeah, I love the kind of the reference to pace, and I think it's also that analogy of like it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think if you sprint, which maybe happens immediately after those moments, that you're gonna run out of steam, and that importance of kind of needing to pause, take stock, to go again. And I again, just building on an analogy, these two know yesterday I've been did some sprinting interval training, and actually the theory behind that training is you go fast, you take a break to build your energy, to fill your cup to go again. And I thought I was going to die yesterday by the River Thames, but I was doing fast, and then I took a breather, and then it enabled me to go again. And there's something sort of in that the consistency is not going to be going sprinting every day, and it is about getting that pace right, so that when we're thinking about organisations, and in this instance anti-racism, that it's embedded in all aspects and structures, so that it doesn't become a kind of a one-off piece of training, or Black History Month, that it's in everything from recruitment to kind of marginalised voices being included, to thinking about community spaces or groups, so that it's the norm to think about diversity and inclusion that way, so that it's everybody's responsibility. It needs to come from the top and leadership, and for them to kind of model that. But I think when it's when it's done well, it is really thought about in a really kind of holistic, systemic way, rather than this kind of one-off as well.
Yeah, you saying that it being everyone's responsibility, it's making me think about before I was saying about maybe for white people, when George Floyd was murdered, them having a bit of a reckoning of their privilege and their kind of position, and how they might benefit from racism, but also what that's like for Black and brown people, in that maintaining that pace of like challenge at all times, or sitting in the deepness and devastation of George Floyd's murder is too much, to kind of stay in that at all times. And the importance of allyship and finding people to be able to kind of cry with, or be rejuvenated with, is so important in order to kind of maintain the movement. So for everyone, it's not you can't maintain that kind of intensity at all times. The importance and almost like the insistence to change pace is so important, but to recognize that the change of pace isn't taken away from the movement. It's in fact rejuvenating you in order to be able to go further.
Agree with that completely. And also, just to add, because George Floyd is always a significant reference because of just how significant that moment was. We were locked down and things like that. But I think the challenge also for some organizations is thinking, okay, that was so long ago, like we've moved on and things like that. But the legacy of we talk about racism here is still very prevalent. And I was just thinking about last summer and the riots and how people felt in that moment, especially Black and brown people, like people getting taxis to work, not wanting to walk the streets because of the kind of like rioting from the far right, and also what's going on with regards to migrants at the hotels, and what happened in Epping with regards to the kind of demonstrations and everything like that, is that race and racism is very prominent in in our society, and people are experiencing it in a direct way, but also in an indirect way through the stories that are happening nationally and globally, and that are dictated by race. Is going to affect how people show up in the workplace. So it's just a call for people to not think because we're 5 or so years, 4 or 5 years since George Floyd, that okay, everything is fine now, because we're still experiencing discrimination in this situation, racism in different guises.
Yeah. And there's something about the kind of, back to your point on allyship, the kind of action taken by leaders, you know, and behaviours demonstrated within an organisation to really demonstrate that allyship that then links to what we often talk about, that sense of belonging. Because I think sometimes, you know, I guess people might have targets and it might be like, okay, visibly there appears to be more diversity in my workplace, but I don't feel, you know, there's a disconnect between like how you feel. Do you feel other? Do you feel that sense of belonging? And that comes from that sense of kind of allyship, and actually the kind of visible diversity matching up with the behaviours and the vibe, as we often say, of an organisation. Because I think sometimes in those moments people can go, right, okay, cool, we'll have a quota, we'll get, you know, more black and brown people, we'll get more women, and it'd be like, tick, we're doing well. But people there could be feeling very unsafe, you know, if they don't have that psychological safety, they don't feel like they can speak up, they feel very much like a minority, or that they're othered, or that they're not included. So I think there's something in the behaviours that kind of marry up as well, which is really important. And I think it's having, like, I guess, inclusion as, I'm not down with like KPIs or those things, but there's something about, you know, there's a space for kind of going, this is more than a value, it's a skill and an expectation that we want of people coming into this organisation, rather than it just being like, oh, these are your values. Because if people have that, and you need to show it and you need to demonstrate it actively, I think that's one way to keep that kind of movement within organisations, rather than it just being like, okay, that's a value that I'm aligned with. Well, how do you show it? And you often say like the whole allyship. Well, how would I know? And I think that's so kind of key as well, isn't it?
That kind of, thank you so much for telling me you're an ally. I love to hear it. How would I know if you didn't tell me that? Like, what am I seeing you doing? How are you kind of showing up? I think it's such a great challenge to not just do the espoused, oh yeah, I'm an ally. How are you doing it?
So thinking about the idea of a moment and movement, what does it look like to kind of treat EDI as a movement and not a moment? And I suppose we can think about that in the work that we do on an organisational, but also I suppose structural and kind of cultural level. What ideas do you have?
I know you're saying you're not really down with KPIs, but there is something about, you know, that kind of, this is the goal, this is the target, like how are we, you know, what are the indicators that we're moving towards that? I think there is something very helpful about having a sort of a plan that keeps you accountable as an organisation, and keeps it on the agenda. Because like when you have a review meeting, or going back to, oh, we haven't done this, actually it's helpful. I need to be able to kind of do those the small steps in order to achieve the bigger goal. So I do think getting something written down, getting some sort of like accountability buddies or partners, maybe externally. So maybe, like organizations like ourselves, or somebody within the organization. Just depends on, I think there are affordances and constraints of having, people within the organization doing it, because they're still got the kind of day-to-day work to be done, but also they're in it, so maybe they're able to offer a kind of a perspective about, is this actually happening? But then maybe having kind of external kind of critical friends is also, a helpful way to kind of, I'm accountable to those guys. I've got to make sure that I've got something to say that I've done, or that we've done as an organisation in our next kind of check-in or review meeting. So I think something like having clear written goals is helpful.
I'm not completely against KPIs, just to say. I think it's more because I've probably not had meaningful ones in my work. So you end up having those meetings, don't you? And it's like,
we all don't want to be here.
Yeah, kind of thing. But I think absolutely, in terms of meaningful targets that are transparent. I think some organisations that do it well, they publish.
Yeah.
This is our goal. And that really then adds to that accountability. So I
Yeah.
think, something around that is super helpful.
Yeah, and I guess so I think when treating EDI as a movement, I think we almost have to. My idea is that we almost have to work with the tools that we have. So when you are both talking about measures of performance and indicators of success, those are the tools we have within organizations. The tools we have within organizations are rewarding people with promotions and new jobs and stuff like that based on different elements of what good looks like in your particular workplace. So for me, I think leaders and managers and people who are leading initiatives who have more inclusive ideas and mentalities in the work that they demonstrate, but also in the interview process, should be rewarded. So it should be rewarded with promotions. It should be rewarded financially if those are the tools that you have within the organization. It should be rewarded with regards to recognition. And I think, and I was talking to, there was this young kid, 18, who plays football with us, and I was just dropping him back and we were having a really good conversation. He's about to start an apprenticeship and he was asking me about what I do. I was telling him about our work and he said, oh, we get asked questions about diversity and inclusion in all of his interviews for all of the apprenticeships with a lot of these big organizations. And I think a lot of the big organizations are doing that. So you're being rewarded if you can answer that question well, because you're more likely to score higher in that element of the interview and get the job. So then the question is, but what does that look like in the context of your workplace? So if we had, and I don't know, maybe organizations are doing this, at every level of the organization, when people are looking to get promoted into leadership roles or different roles, what interview scenario or questions do you have for somebody to really demonstrate their ability to create a more or enhance inclusivity and belonging in the workplace? Like we have in interviews, we have to not only answer the question, but we have to demonstrate, give an example, or we have to do a presentation to show how good we are at the core elements of our job. So making that a core element of your job, of your measures of success, and rewarding people who are able to create who are able to demonstrate that or refer to a body of work that they've done in a previous role that contributes to enhancing inclusivity. I think that's a really one example of how DEI can be or EDI can be a movement in your workplace. It shouldn't start and stop with an interview question. It shouldn't start and stop with a one-off training. It shouldn't start and stop with one conversation. It should be evidenced in all elements of the role, and that's how you keep it as a movement. Work with the tools that the organisation has.
I think another thing, I guess, moving earlier to like organisations that we're talking about and often we work with, and it's kind of early intervention and, you know, what happens in schools. I have hope that like things are looking different. When I think of my kind of nieces and nephews, they are far switched on as adolescents than I was at that age, because I think it's kind of become normalised to have conversations about kind of difference and diversity. I don't think, you know, we're there at all, but there's something about that, whereas I think, you know, you see that, and then hopefully that will continue for those that are entering the workplace. We talk a lot about Gen Zs. I think I'm here for them and some of the kind of ideas that they bring, because I feel like the movement is within a lot of the generation coming through. Those ideas are there, and I think how we can nurture that rather than seeing it as the, you know, negative people coming through, you know, questioning stuff. It's like, brilliant, we need to question, you know, the kind of hopeful disruptors. We need to kind of question things and for things to be different. But I think it's also about buy-in, you know, and I agree with that idea of the kind of, for it to be seen, you know, as a kind of expectation rather than a value. But you know, at that upper level, that it really is, you know, bought in of the importance of it. I think sometimes in our training, you know, well, not sometimes, we always talk about the business case for diversity and inclusion, and I think that's so important. It isn't just about being nice. It isn't just saying like, oh, let's all, you know, have this difference. It makes business sense. Like, more diverse and included teams, people are more likely to stay, they're more likely to be innovative. You don't spend loads of money on people leaving and recruiting. Like, it's not just about like, this is a good thing to do, or wokeism that people sometimes critique. It makes business sense. So I think the more people understand that and we can spread that message, the more likely to have that buy-in, and it moves beyond a tick box and into kind of a movement that's embedded into all kind of spaces within an organisation as well. Right. Thank you. It's been a good chat.
Yeah.
And let's keep this movement going.
Yeah.
Social matters to the world.
To the world.
The
Come on.
movement. Thank you. We have been 3 40-somethings.
All right. Jeez.
I love that you're only 40 and I'm like 40-somethings. I'm dragging you in. We have been 3 social workers talking about social matters. If you want to join and add to the conversation, you can follow us on Instagram @MattersPodcast, on LinkedIn, Social Matters, and do watch us on YouTube. If the audio is not enough, you can see our visuals on our YouTube channel as well. So do check it out and join in the conversation.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.